What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast powered by Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. We're going to talk about the 5 players who are the most pivotal. I don't know how to describe it. You wouldn't say the most important, right? Because Cam Ward, Mish Powell, Ruben Bain, those are easy ones. But these are the guys who need to really take that step forward, because if they do, this could be a really special team. So there are 5 players, let's call them swing players, 5 players that need to step up to make this team what it can be. First, I want to talk about some folks who always step up, and that is Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anijar and Levine. All right, Pete, hop in. So, we've been through a lot of camp here. Got the second scrimmage coming up here this weekend. Much better idea about this team. Been able to observe them. Again, we can't go out and say all the things that are happening because of what's happening in that first game, but read between the lines of some of this stuff. These are some guys that we're talking about today that, to me, are not the most heralded guys in the world, but I'm going to be watching very, very closely. I've been watching them closely, in terms of their development in camp, and then also here in this first game and the first few games to see what are they going to be, because we don't know like we know with some of these other guys.
Yeah, and look, luckily there's less of those guys this year, D, than there have been in the past 10, 15 years, I feel like. And we talked about it on yesterday's show when we talked about the national media hype. There's a lot more known commodities on this roster in important positions, but as we'll get to here in a second, this list of players, I think, can take this team to the next level in certain spots. Certain spots, if they aren't what the staff believes they are, if they aren't kind of what we're projecting them to be, then potentially could be in some trouble in a couple spots here. But it's a very interesting list of guys here that, look, I think we believe these guys are poised to have breakout seasons, so to speak, but they need to live up to these expectations that have been placed on them internally at Miami.
Yeah, let's start right at the position that I think Canes fans stay up at night a little bit, which is the secondary. Now, I've said it, the secondary has not been bad during camp at all. They've received high marks and performed better than maybe people expected. This is not a secondary like 1998 for some of you guys that can remember that far back, where you had guys like, I hate to say names, but you remember Nick Ward getting toasted quite a bit back in those days. And Miami secondary was really the weak spot of the team, and it was getting smoked. This team, the secondary, is not, to me, like a D secondary or a C- secondary, even a C secondary. But when every other position is B+A on paper, it stands out. And I think the thing that's lacking in this secondary is that true impact player, right? You have Cam Ward at quarterback. You have Damian Martinez in the backfield. You have great receivers. We talked about all of them. Xavier Restrepo is on every list, but the other guys might even be more explosive. Offensive line, you got 3 that I think are premier players. Elijah Arroyo, tight end, could be a guy. We'll talk about him a little later. Defensive ends, we know Ruben Bain. We know all these guys. Kiko Mauanoa, linebacker. Secondary, I don't see that guy that you say this guy could be a true impact, first-team all-conference kind of guy on paper. Daryl Porter, very solid last year. Mish Powell, very solid throughout his career. But if there's a guy that has the ability to truly be an impact player, an NFL day 1, day 2 type pick in the secondary, it is Damari Brown. We beat Alabama, Nick Saban for him out of high school, showed some big flashes as a freshman last year, big hits, nice coverage in the FSU game, 200 pounds, can move, second-generation player, had a brother that is currently playing college football. The bloodlines are there. The training is there. Can he step up as an outside corner and as a nickel where he's getting a lot of work as not just an adequate player, but an impact player?
Yeah, and the physicality, obviously, is I'm playing some of these clips now, definitely is one of his strong suits. Had a really big game against Keon Coleman in Florida State in a premier matchup for him against a high draft pick up there. And you saw in that game, I think, D, what he brings is the ability to match up with some of these bigger bodied receivers and be a guy who has that coverage ability. But then you see him here, making tackles, and Mario has talked about his ability to tackle and bring the physical aspect to his game from the secondary. But I think nickel, he could really shine there in the spot. And we've had some comments on some of our videos recently, D, about, well, why is he, going to play nickel? I think prototypically you think of those nickel guys as smaller, quicker players in the slot there. But his ability to blitz, again, here he is in run support, very, very solid there. And then, man, he was already had a nice frame coming in, but seeing him up close in person in fall practice here, looks like he's taking the next step in the weight room as well.
Yeah, and having a big physical guy who can cover but can also really strike and is hard to move when it comes to the run fits that position requires at nickel, it opens up a whole new avenue. I mean, to Corey Couch in the passing game as a nickel was fine, but then when it came to some of the running game stuff, he was a little bit undersized. So a guy like Damari Brown, who is legit 200 pounds, plays even bigger than that size. One of the bigger hitters on the team, quite frankly, but still a lifelong corner, was a corner in high school, son of a defensive back, brother of a corner. His coaches at American Heritage really, really excel in that position, that side of the ball. So he's a true cover corner, but he has that physicality that I think lends itself to the running game. Also a very dangerous blitzer, and he's nickel. He's right there at that spot. I think when you watch those highlights, you saw him against FSU, against 2 NFL receivers. You saw him against Thrash from Louisville, another NFL receiver, and he looks the part. Talking to people around the program, they say this guy, when he's going, he looks like an NFL day 1, day 2 type of guy. And I think that's really what the secondary needs, because Daryl Porter, another Heritage guy, I'm not worried about the floor, but I'm not over the moon about the ceiling, meaning I'm not sure he's going to be that elite player. Maybe he will be. He's extremely solid, and God, very thankful that we have him here at the University of Miami. But in terms of guys that can really be those NFL kind of guys, I think Damari Brown stands atop of that list.
Yeah, agreed 100%. I think, look, you look at this Miami roster, we're very excited about the year ahead, and there's going to be a bunch of guys I think that are drafted this year. But he is by the looks of it early on, a future top 100 type pick at that position. Of course, didn't really see those consistent snaps until later in the season. So I think that was very valuable for him. Did get some early time, but became the guy there at corner late in the season for Miami. So hopefully he can build on that.
Yep. And that is the position to watch, but not the only position that we're going to be talking about. Let's move one spot over, right? So we talked about nickel / corner and how Damari Brown could change the look of that position. Let's move on to the safety position with one of the guys we've talked about so much on this podcast, but it bears repeating, and that is Jaden Harris out of Georgia, third-year player, 3-star recruit, much less heralded than Damari Brown, who was a 4-star who Miami beat Alabama for. Jaden Harris was not that kind of recruit, but he does have a lot of size, a lot of speed. You see him here running to the ball. He's somebody who he brings, again, we talked about the speed. He's third-year player. He's close to 200 pounds. He has that physical presence that you want. He has the mentality and the toughness. We've seen him make a lot of plays against the run in camp and spring. He in practices over the years, he excels there. He hits it hard. See him again. He's wearing number 19. He's now number 7 in this picture. We see the tackling ability. He plays the game the right way. He works the right way. If there's a weakness, I think it's just the ball in the air, sort of the instinctive kind of ball skills. I don't see that with him, or I haven't seen it yet, but he does have a real passion for coming up against the run and being physical. And I've talked to people around the program who believe that this safety group can be better than last year. Now look, 2 guys drafted. I'm not sure these 2 guys get drafted between Powell and Harris. I'm not sure. I mean, they could. I think they probably will if they develop the way I expect them to, but it's not a guarantee. Those 2 guys did get drafted, and Cam Kitchens was an All-America. Are these guys going to be All-Americas? I don't know. But from what I'm told, talking to people, the reliability of these 2, the consistency. James Williams is a linebacker now, 240-pound inside linebacker in the pros. He's not a safety in the pros. Cam Kitchens was an All-America as a sophomore, took a big step back as a junior, not because of talent or work ethic or anything. I think he just tried to do too much and got out of sorts. Plus, he had that nasty injury against Texas A&M, the concussion. So with Harris and Powell, if they're solid, if they're in the right places, if they're safeties in the true meaning of the word, they could be a better unit than what we had last year.
Yeah, you said it. I don't know if Harris is a ball hawk, so to speak, at the position, but size, speed, willing to tackle. From all accounts, he's a guy that I wasn't there that day, but you interviewed him, and from everything that I've heard and the small couple dealings I've had with him, really good kid. So he has everything you want from that standpoint. Again, just got to show it. Showed flashes of it last year when Cam went down. Mario, and I've said this multiple times on the show, went out of his way to single him out as a guy who he said, look, was a great special teams player for us, but didn't know if we could trust him fully at the safety spot yet. He gained their trust due to the circumstances, due to what you just talked about, as Cam coming back, and obviously he was going to play as many snaps as possible. Didn't get all that run, but man, I think he's in for a big season, and very excited about what he can bring to the team this year.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about guys with size and speed between him and Brown. They look the part. And if you're guys that look the part, play the part, now your team is starting to look the right way. So that's why those two, I think, in the defensive backgrounds, a lot of guys we could have said, but because of what they bring to the table, I think from a physical standpoint, if those guys step up and really make an impact, your team overall lifts and the ceiling raises a little bit. Switching gears to the offensive side of the ball, a guy that's got a lot of attention. I've got a lot of questions about him just walking around on the street, meeting people. He's one of the first guys people ask about, which is interesting given his position, but that is center Zach Carpenter, Indiana transfer, originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, played at Moeller, big-time program in Cincinnati, signed with Michigan out of high school, did some nice things early on in his career there. He was a guy that was in line to play, ended up transferring to Indiana, and ended up being an honorable mention All Big Ten player there. 6'5", 300, wide body. The comparisons to Matt Lee, who's an emotional leader of this team, a fiery leader, a guy with great athleticism. Carpenter's not going to, talk as much as Matt Lee. He's not that kind of outgoing personality from at least everything I understand. And we've talked to him. Cool kid. We enjoyed our interview with him. But just different energies, just different kinds of guys. Carpenter also not as athletic as Matt Lee. Matt Lee, you've seen him in the NFL doing very well in the preseason. However, Carpenter is not, some walk-on, right, that you just are throwing out there. He's not someone you're getting from like low-level FCS. This is the guy that was honorable mention All Big Ten. We know what that means to play offensive line in the Big Ten. We know what it means to be at Moeller, Ohio, and do your thing there. So this is a Midwestern lineman with experience, with size, who's gone against the Ohio States of the world, the Michigans of the world. And I think he's going to be better than expected filling in for Matt Lee. But big shoes to fill. And if there is a question mark on that offensive line, you bring back Mauno, you bring back Rivers, you bring back Cooper, those guys are going to be better. You have a lot of depth at tackle that can play guard. This center position to me is the thing that you're watching to see if this line will be as good as last year or better.
Yeah, and you mentioned there are different personalities at that position. Communication is so important. I think Zach Carpenter has said himself recently in interviews that it took him a little bit to kind of get adjusted to, obviously living in South Florida. He talked about it in the interview a little bit as well, but gelling with the guys, mingling with them, becoming one unit. And look, I think the question is not even just the personality. Matt Lee was in my opinion, a top 5 to top 7 center in the country last year. We've discussed at length why he wasn't a high draft pick, nature of the position, the injury background concerns with him. But I think that's why this could be such a swing position, because that was not a spot that you had to worry about last year for Miami.
And it's such a leadership position, right? We think of Matt Lee after the Georgia Tech game, that meme with him, basically very emotional and saying what the hell's going on here. You're not going to see that from Carpenter, but that doesn't mean that he cannot be an effective leader and that he cannot be effective in his role, communicating with the offensive line and communicating with Cam Ward. These guys are all different. And I think sometimes we read too much into the outward displays of emotion like that. This is a guy who's tough. This is a guy who broke his hand and started snapping with the other hand and didn't miss a beat, didn't have to play guard. They were going to move him to guard to play. And he said, you know what, I'm a center. I'm just going to switch hands. So this guy with a lot of toughness. You always hear people say, hey, we want Midwestern offensive linemen. This guy was not only a Midwestern offensive lineman, but he's proven himself in that league, in that level of competition. And I think he's going to, I'm not saying he's going to be a breakout, top, 3-round kind of player, or an All-America, or even what Matt Lee was. I'm not saying that. But in terms of a guy who gets the job done and you don't notice him in a good way, I think Zach Carpenter can do that.
Agreed. 100%. And again, I think that it's just a position sometimes you forget about, right? That the center, it's there, and they can only do so much, but it's for the line as a whole, right? And you're going into a game one where it's going to be very loud there. The communication needs to be on point. He does have a lot of experience, and I think that will end up coming into play big time for him.
Yeah, and it's going to be, that was an interesting transition coming from the Midwest to the University of Miami. A lot of people doing that transition here as school opens. So if you are a student at the University of Miami, you have a kid that's a student at the University of Miami, you just want to get some great gear, go to the Miami Hurricane team store. Students 10% off at the team store. So stock up there if you have your student card. But even if you're not a student, get these beautiful strategy jerseys, which are basically the black base jerseys with the orange colors. I was at the team store yesterday, got myself a nice polo, but I did see those in stock. They look absolutely terrific. And the store itself is just beautiful. It's right across campus at the Thesis Hotel. If you grew up going to All Canes, this is the new All Canes, the new and improved All Canes. Harry Rothwell, the owner. This is hand in glove with the team itself, part of the athletic department in terms of the revenue. So you're talking about supporting the program and getting the absolute best gear right from the source. Miami Hurricane Team Store. That's Miami HTS, Hurricane Team Store, MiamiHTS.com.
Man, they got Pancake Honcho on here, man, with his poncho.
Look at that. Do you think of that one ahead of time?
I just thought about it right now.
Oh, that's a bar. Good job.
I don't even know if there's a poncho, but looks like it.
All right. Let's talk about somebody who, he might need a poncho with the way the passes are going to be raining down on him, and that is Elijah Arroyo, tight end. This is a guy who really, since his high school film, I've been raving about him. Other people have been raving about him. He, in high school, ran routes like a receiver. He was a former quarterback. He has great size, 6'4", 240. He has everything that you need at the position. See some of these highlights, number 8 catching passes here. This is a guy that catches the ball with his hands. This is a guy that can run after the catch. He's a very physical blocker. He can handle collisions. And I'm going to say just kind of my first of many hot takes, and this was probably a lukewarm take, but I truly believe it. If Elijah Arroyo stays healthy this season, I believe he will be the best tight end in the ACC. I believe he will be one of the best tight ends in the country, and I believe he'll be the highest drafted tight end since David Njoku. He has all it takes when it comes to size, movement skills, receiver polish, blocking, all of the above, attitude, run after catch. He showed his speed in camp. He showed it in spring with long touchdowns. He can do it all, and I think he is somebody that can really take this offense to the next level, which struggled in the red zone last year. This is exactly what you want in the red zone because he can block for the running back. He can split out wide and win that way, or he can just run a route while he's an inline tight end and win in that fashion. You can put him on the move. You can do a lot of things with an Elijah Arroyo, and I think he, along with the other tight ends, is going to really help the red zone offense.
Yeah, you kind of took the words out of my mouth there. He's a complete tight end, right? And in today's day and age, these guys tend to be pigeonholed into a receiving tight end, a blocking tight end, and we do it as well. But he's really someone that I think is the complete package, feeling like himself again. We interviewed him back in spring for Canes Connection, and he said he felt like he was ready to go. He felt like he was finally 100%. The last couple of years have been difficult injury-wise for him, but could it be a blessing in disguise for him because I think he's really put that work in the weight room. Talking to some people around the program, just they say he looks the part in terms of a legit NFL guy. And this, I know you've said it as well, but I was talking to someone else the other day who told me the same thing. And again, another guy who Cam Ward has spoken very highly of in his interviews as of late.
Yeah, this is tight end you. And Miami really is Miami when Miami has an elite tight end. And I think this guy has a chance to really elevate the ceiling of this team, of this offense. And he's a good guy. These guys are well-liked, well-respected players, when you talk about Cam Ward, Restrepo, Rivers, guys like that, really, when your best players are the best character guys, that helps you. Ruben Bain, I mean, give me a break. Francisco both Mauanovas. Arroyo's in that mold. So you hope that he stays healthy, because if he does, I think talent, character, all of those things will elevate him to a position where he will be the highest drafted Miami Hurricane tight end since David Njoku.
And then we'll wrap it up, D, with our last guy here, who is at a position that we feel very strongly about this position, but I think he brings something different to the table from some of these top guys that we've been really harping on, and that is Ahmad Moten.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to 2017, right? You had an excellent pair of defensive tackles with Kendrick Norton, Richard McIntosh, RJ McIntosh, dominated against some good offensive lines, including Notre Dame. The third guy in that mix was Anthony Moten, Ahmad Moten's older brother. And he was very solid. He gave you size. He gave you some athleticism. And he relieved those two and gave you very quality depth, and really took that group to another level by just giving those guys a break up top. You didn't just have the two stars. You had another quality player with a great, frame and great ability. Ahmad Moten is more talented than his brother. I'm sure his brother will probably be the first to tell you if he's being honest. And his brother was very good. He was in NFL camps, but Ahmad Moten is extremely explosive, has a lot of ability. And I think people are watching Ahmad Moten, waiting for that next step. And he's made big time strides. And with the spotlight on him to alleviate the pressure from Barrow, Clark, those top two guys, he has a chance to really take it to another level. He's got size. In terms of talent, he's right there with those two, if not ahead of those two. He's got tools, and he's now entering his third year, so he has experience. Can he be consistent as that next defensive tackle in the rotation, push those two starters, and really elevate his game? Because if he does, this defensive tackle room, which is good up top but thin, looks a whole lot different.
Yeah, I think it's you said consistency. I think finishing plays, right? I think with those big guys in the middle there, sometimes they flash. You see them moving around. You see them, break through the interior of the offensive line, and then they just aren't able to finish play. I'm not saying necessarily he's done that, but if he can start to string some of those plays together, he gives you another weapon in there on the inside. And look, we talk about it. I think Miami has the defensive line, obviously, but the interior defensive line is not the biggest, right? If Miami does what they're supposed to do this year, which is we expect them to get to the playoffs, right? I think they have the D-line to get through the ACC there. But once you get to that next level of playoff type teams, contentions, you're going to be facing some big trenches in those playoff games potentially. This is where a guy like him, I think, would really come into play.
Yeah, this is a guy you got from Brett Venables at Oklahoma, beat him out for this player, and he is equipped to take on these, like you said, Big Ten SEC type offensive lines physically. He's got to do it consistently. But just to wrap up, we know what Cam Ward can do. We know what Damian Martinez can do. We know what Restrepo can do. We know what Jalen Rivers can do. Ruben Bain. These are proven players. The guys that can really elevate the ceiling of this team, and for the real hardcore fans to keep an eye on. Number 8, Elijah Arroyo. Number 99, Ahmad Moten. Number 50, Zach Carpenter. Number 6, Damari Brown. Number 7, Jaden Harris. These are some of the most important guys on this team, because if they hit, this team is going to be an incredible ball club.
Yeah, and would love to hear from you guys. Drop in the comments who you think are some pivotal guys who could potentially, again, we know who the stars are. We're talking about the guys who are on the top 100 lists nationally and been named in preseason All ACC, all that stuff. But who do you guys think are these pivotal players that we're talking about here, guys that Miami needs to step up this season to be able to accomplish what we all think they can do? So remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel. Got a couple weeks here before the Florida game. Excited for your preseason pod coming up soon, D. And then we have our marathon show, of course, not next week, but the week after, the Wednesday before the Florida game. Excited to do that one for you all. So like this video, subscribe to the channel. Go Canes.
Go Canes.
Yeah, this an insight to the Canes, and you know we ain't playing no games. Joaquin said dominate, so that's what we do. Home of the legends and 7th floor crew, down in Miami where hurricanes brew. You here for the rumors, we bring you the news, cause it's all about the you, and nobody do it like CanesInSight. 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 It's CanesInSight.